Good evening all and welcome to this evening's Scrutiny Committee. I'm Councillor Graham Friend representing Poulton North and I will be chairing the meeting. Due to the current coronavirus pandemic, the Council have taken steps to follow restrictions and health guidance in relation to self-isolation and social distancing whilst balancing the needs of carrying out our regulatory functions. This is the first meeting of this committee that has been held remotely. The agenda for the meeting will run as per the usual format. I can confirm that the meeting is being broadcast live to the public. However, there will be no input from the public. They only have audio access. This is in line with the requirements of the Coronavirus Act of 2020, Section 78. I will now ask all those present to introduce themselves, starting with my fellow councillors and co-opted members of the committee. So is Councillor Cregan there? Councillor Froggatt?
I'm here.
Would you introduce yourself, Councillor Froggatt?
It's Councillor Froggatt from Poulton with Fernhead South.
Thank you. Councillor Flaherty?
Councillor Jean Flaherty, Fairfield and Howley.
And Councillor Marks?
I'm Councillor Ian Marks, Lynn North and Thelwall.
I believe there is another councillor trying to log in as soon as they can get online. We'll introduce them. Do we have the Roman Catholic and Church of England representative? Mr. Littlewood? No. Parent Governor representative, Mr. Allam?
Yes, my name is Dr. Nurul Alam. Yes.
Okay, I will now ask those presenting officers and those presenting reports to introduce themselves. We have Democratic Services.
Good evening, Jenny Cordwell, Senior Democratic Services Officer.
We have the Deputy Chief Executive and Director of Corporate Services.
Good evening, everyone. Yes, Linton Green, Deputy Chief Executive.
And we have the Sorry. Go on, introduce yourself. Okay, we have the Deputy Director of Corporate Services.
Hi, I'm Gareth Hopkins, Deputy Director of Corporate Services.
Do we have any other officers that I haven't mentioned? No, okay then. Turning to the agenda, item 1, apologies for absence.
We have apologies from Councillor Fradgley.
Thank you. Item 2, Code of Conduct. Remember, members are reminded of their responsibility to declare any disclosure, pecuniary or non-pecuniary interest which they have in any item of business on the agenda no later than when that item is reached. Right, minutes. This is to confirm the minutes of the meeting held on the 19th of February. If anybody can remember back that far. Have we all had a copy of the minutes? Do we have any points of accuracy on the minutes? Okay, can I take that as a confirmation and that's a true record?
I'm abstaining on that because there was absent chair.
Okay, thank you, Councillor
I
Roberts.
suppose, because I don't think anyone else who's here today was there then.
There's just you and me, I think.
Yeah.
Ian.
No, I was there. I was there as a listener that day, basically.
Okay, we'll move them as a correct record. Okay, item 4, the council's response to the COVID-19 pandemic. Is that you, Linton?
It is, thank you, Councillor Friend. If I just a brief introduction. I mean, clearly, COVID is something that we've all been having to deal with for the last 6 months, and I think after the conversation that we'd had, thought it was a very appropriate thing to bring to this committee to look at how the council has responded. Rather than trying to pull together a huge report, what Gareth and myself have put together is a very short covering report, but actually highlighting to councillors some of the things that we've already been doing and bringing to Cabinet. And I think that gives a much wider picture of what the impact has been on the council. The pack that you've got tonight has 4 main documents attached to the report. The first is a presentation that was given to Cabinet back in June, which was the council's response to coronavirus so far, and that touched on all areas of council business. There's also then our performance report for Q1, and I think quite telling was the amount of impact on the council's performance caused by coronavirus, and there's a lot of detail in there. Of course, nothing happens with anything we change within the council without it having an impact on our finances. So again, we've attached the budget monitoring position at Q1 for the council, which was seriously impacted by the impact of COVID. And then finally, the corporate strategy for 2020-24, which went to Cabinet and then more recently to full council last week. And that, of course, looks at the development of our recovery plans for each service and how we look to try and respond to COVID going forward. So those are the documents you've got in front of you. I'm hoping that councillors have had a chance to look through some of those already, if not previously when they were reported through to other bodies. Between Gareth and myself, we're happy to try and take comments and questions on those. Perhaps ask other areas that you might, as a future date, want to drill into more detail in terms of the council's response. And anything we can't answer, we're quite happy to take away as questions back to other colleagues across the council.
Okay, does anybody have any questions on those documents?
Yes, Jim.
Councillor Marks?
Yeah, no, thank you, Linton. I mean, one question that sort of people are asking is that they know that COVID has cost the council a lot of money. They know that some of it's come back from the government, but they're perhaps a little bit sort of unsure exactly where the losses have come from. I mean, it's obviously some of it's loss of income, some of it's extra costs. Can you sort of give us, and I realise this only goes up to sort of Q1, can you give us the sort of an instant ready reckoning, just so if a member of the public asks this question, we can say, yes, it's cost the council just these few, big items. Is that possible?
Yeah, yes, it is, Councillor Marks, and indeed we're doing a monthly return that we have to send back to MHCLG with our current spend in relation to COVID. I think very broadly, I would say that the costs of it are about split into thirds. Yeah. 1/3 of the cost is the additional cost of supporting adult and children's social care, mostly adult social care in that area. Ensuring that those care homes have had the extra support they've needed to deal with residents being put into them, some quite quickly as they were discharged from hospitals. Others in terms of ensuring that those care homes continue to be financially viable and paying them even if they haven't got somebody in those care homes, because they've either lost residents or they've not been able to accept new residents, which they would normally have done. All councillors will recall in February when we set the budget for the current year. Within that budget, there was around £14 million worth of savings that we'd put forward. And of course, some of those savings would likely have had big impacts and changes to the likes of adult social care, but also other council services. What we've found is that during this first 6 months, it's been very difficult to progress on delivering any of those savings. So actually 1/3 roughly of the extra costs has been delays in delivering on the savings that we thought we would be making during this year. It's just been almost impossible to deliver on some of them. And then the final area has been around income that we've lost. Some of that has been income that we were planning to deliver that we've not yet been able to bring forward. But actually big areas have related to things like car parking, to bus lane enforcement fines, to school meals income, planning fees. When we've gone through it, you almost forget how much the council has to generate in the way of income in terms of supporting our budget. And lots of those areas have completely dropped away over the last 6 months. In addition to that, though, the government has most recently, and we've just done a submission today, given us the opportunity to try and reclaim some of the lost income. But even then, they've only allowed us to claim back 75% of a figure of 95% of the original budgeted income for areas we've lost. And that doesn't include all types of income. It's only what they've classified as sales fees and charges. So at the moment, we think we're going to get about another £2.5 million back from government on that. But overall, in rough figures, as I've said, it's about £36 million of costs. Of that 36 million, we believe around 12 million is on adult and children's social care costs. Around 12 million of our savings programme not being delivered, and in total around 12 million of budgeted income. And then we're getting some of that income back, around 2.5 million, and we have had government grant of approaching 13 million. So overall, leaving us in a position of roughly £20 million overspend at this time.
Okay, thank you very much, Lynn. I think that's extremely helpful and useful. I'm hoping that if the press are listening, they might pick that up and put that out to the wider public. That's very useful indeed, because it's nice and simple as well.
Thank you.
Thanks, Linton.
Linton, do we know? Sorry, go on.
Yeah, I have a question. What is the impact on the school, academy, primary school, high school, and its budget? What is the impact on that basically, last 6 months basically, from budget wise? Can you explain that, please?
So is that the impact on schools and academy budgets?
It's school, primary, high school, and academy budget.
Yeah, the position that I've presented tonight is purely the council's budget. Because of the way the schools are funded, although the council passes on funding to a number of them, their funding comes directly from central government. I know that schools have been able to claim back some of their additional costs, but that's something we've been working really closely with schools, because of course they're continuing to incur costs that are beyond that they've been given the opportunity to claim back from central government. But none of the schools' costs are included within the figures that we've presented tonight. It is dealt with separately.
Okay, thank you.
Chair, I don't know whether you can hear me.
Yes, I can, yes.
I apologise. I did try to join the meeting online. Now I'm doing it by phone. I could hear everybody, but I couldn't get any sound or pictures. So I have joined. But on
Is that Mr. Littlewood?
It is. Yes, sorry.
Introduce yourself, please.
Yeah, so David Littlewood. I represent the Catholic Archdiocese and now the Liverpool Anglican Diocese as well. And could I say on that last point, I'm involved with two primary schools, one Catholic and one Anglican, and they're both the head teachers have been praising the Borough Council, the Children's Services Department, for the support they've had under the very difficult circumstances.
Yes, but I think most of the primary schools in Warrington are still council run, aren't they, I believe?
Most are.
Yes, they are. Most aren't academies.
I think there's 1 or 2 academies, and the other 80 or so are still for the council. It's some sort of figure like that.
Having said that, Chair, we're working very closely with all the schools, regardless of whether they're academies or council schools.
Yes, of course. I've noticed Councillor Hill has joined. Do you want to introduce yourself, Councillor Hill?
Yeah, Councillor Hill, councillor for Rixton and Woolston. Sorry, I just couldn't get my computer on today for some reason.
They're wonderful when they work well. Does anybody have anything else on that report? I noticed on page 2 you started planning in January for the pandemic, which we're quite pleased to see.
Yes, Chair. I think we really started planning for it back in January when we realised that this was something that was even affecting in other countries. But we had in our existing risk register the issue of pandemic flu for a number of years. And I think that really has helped us in terms of at least being in a slightly better place than some when we started having to react to it. I think what's within the papers does show how quickly the council did react to something that was well, quite a major change for all of us.
Yeah. I was looking at your initial plan on page 4, the first item there, recruiting more care workers. Was that successful?
Sorry, Chair, which page was that on?
Sorry, it's page 4 of the 31-page document. You've got our initial plan.
Chair, it's Gareth here. I'm happy to take that. I think you're referring to the plan from the cabinet presentation in respect of social care recruitment. So yeah, that was one of my areas that I was involved with. Yes, it was successful. It was a joint piece, really. We did quite a lot of external recruitment from people who are not in work and looking for work, but we also approached people who were furloughed within the restrictions of that scheme as part of that, to see what work we could take on from some of our partner organisations who were able to do that. And then we also did redeployment from within our workforce as well. So it's very short notice. So as you can imagine, some of our recruitment processes are quite lengthy. And there were some changes we made just to be able to bring in people at very short notice. We were really pleased with what we did there. We were able to help fill gaps very, very quickly. So that went particularly well. Sorry, one more. I was just going to say just one more thing is now as we prepare for the winter as well, what we are finding as well is actually the job market is there are more candidates than ever out there, probably reflecting the wider economy. So as we're working with colleagues in adult social care and within the wider care sector as well, it's a positive in one way because it's always been difficult to recruit in some of those roles. We are actually now, for probably the first time ever, starting to get maybe an oversupply of people applying for jobs, which we've never really had before. But that probably reflects the wider economy. Thanks, Chair.
Yes, I noticed also on that same page, providing homeless emergency centre to support people sleeping rough. Diana's a trustee at Room at the Inn, and I know the council, was it the Premier Inn that they housed a lot of the rough sleepers in?
I believe it was the Travel Lodge, Chair.
The Travel Lodge, sorry.
Yes, and we made arrangements. We did get some government grant towards that in terms of helping to get homeless people into one place and moving those that were rough sleeping on the streets into one place. And yes, got a lot of people quite quickly into there to get them more protected. We've continued to work beyond that as well, and now we've prepared another facility on Museum Street that's enabling those people so they don't have to go back onto the street. We've actually got a much better facility for them, which is now longer term.
I know the Travel Lodge was very popular with them.
So my question is, how long going to be? It is already closed, or is this ongoing process basically? It is good initiative, but that's why I'm asking my question.
Yeah,
they're no longer housed at the Travel Lodge. Most of them have been moved to a facility in Museum Street, and that's a long-term project, I believe.
Thank you.
Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, distribution of food parcels. I know I was in there helping pack them at the beginning, so
what
phenomenal number of food parcels distributed. Sorry,
Chair. What is your question around food parcels? I mean, you're right. There was a lot of work, a lot of engaging with the community, work through the food banks in terms of making sure that those people that were most vulnerable and having to isolate and not being able to get access to food that we could make sure they got some food. I think that worked very well for the first couple of months when things were hardest. And what we've tried to do is put other things in place to ensure that those people were able to then work through their own community and their own friends and family to carry on, rather than it needing to be the council having to help with that on an ongoing basis.
Yeah.
I guess the thing is, we need to make sure that we've got that or something around those facilities and that community support available if we need to, if we go into a further lockdown.
Yes, which is extremely possible. No, I was just pointing out some of the really good things in the report that I picked up on. That not everybody knows, as Councillor Marks was saying, when people ask you what has the council done, there's been some amazing work by councillor officers. And then the business grants and the...
Yes, on business grants, we actually finished paying the first tranche of those out tomorrow. The whole government scheme closes. But in that period, we'll have paid out over £38 million to over 2,500 businesses, small grants of between £10,000 and £25,000 to actually enable those businesses to keep going, particularly whilst they might have had to have shut down and maybe furloughed a lot of their staff, but still had ongoing premises costs and the like. In addition to that, we've also administered business rate support to a number of retail and hospitality businesses as well. So, yeah, in grand scheme of things, tens of millions of pounds of support into local businesses.
Chairman, can I say?
Certainly.
Yeah, I mean, this actually follows on from what Linton was saying just a moment ago. My question is, I mean, one of the things that's come out of this is the extremely good cooperation between different groups, whether it's the council, the NHS and the voluntary sector. I think this is generally recognised, that some of these things were starting to happen, but it certainly sort of forced some of these things through, which is good. And it's the upside of this terrible thing that's happening. But I mean, given that it looks as if we're going to have many, many more months of this, you know, all the sort of the signs are coming out, and they're talking about additional restrictions in the northwest, you know, Merseyside, and maybe us in the very near future. So my question is really, it's a general one, that given that we've worked well together, what specific lessons have we learned from this that we need to make sure we don't lose, to use this horrible phrase, moving forward? I mean, it's very easy to say, yeah, cooperation has been good and that's great, but then not to actually decide exactly what's happened that we can bring into our normal way of working, whatever that might be in the future. I know it's early days, this, and obviously there'll be some sort of report later, but given the thing is ongoing, I mean, what specific lessons of doing things differently have we learned that we can perhaps bring to bear on the situation? I don't know, that's for Linton or Gareth or whoever.
Well, it's either me or Gareth. I get there's probably almost too many to mention, but I think you're right. Some of those things that we've had to collaborate really quickly with partners on has perhaps helped us streamline some of the processes that we might spend months deliberating how we do something, taking it through various committees. It has helped us speed up the way that we take some decisions. But of course, with that, I guess there are also risks as well in taking those decisions quickly. We did temporarily change some of the things within the Constitution to enable some decisions to be taken quicker, particularly around how we were procuring certain contracts, but to make sure there was transparency on that, all of those decisions that were taken under emergency powers by officers have then also gone back to Cabinet to show that the reasons why those decisions were taken. But I think that it's been, for me, it has just been a fantastic collective effort. It doesn't matter which partner it is, everybody's been pulling together for the benefit of Warrington. But I'm not sure there's a single thing that I could put my finger on and say we really need to make sure we hold on to that going forward.
Linton, I was going to just add a couple of things onto that, if I can, for Councillor Marks, just in terms of the lessons learned, stock takes that we took in a couple of places. So in the northwest, across adult social services, where there was particular cooperation in terms of the way that you asked the question, Councillor Marks, in terms of between health and partners and adult social care. They did a formal stock take. It was about June time. I've got it up here in front of me really, where they took some of the key lessons in the learning. They did it in a structured way. It was around about what they decided to. I'm just looking here. Sorry, they decided what have they had to start doing that they now need to stop. What do they start doing that they wanted to carry on doing, and they made a list of those things. And also they looked at the things that we'd stopped at that point and needed to restart, and things that we'd stopped and didn't want to restart. So it was done in a kind of formal framework way, and it's just helped them, I think, to understand where they wanted to go with this. When we kind of went through that first wave around June time, and then also as a senior leadership team led by the chief executive, we also did a bit of a lessons learned. Exactly as Linton said, there's way too many things for us to list here in terms of some of the lessons that we learned. But I would probably put forward the one in terms of breaking down of silos and the ability to move quite quickly to get things done in that March to May period was something that I think has stuck with us, and we've carried on doing, not just within the council, across directorates, across services, but as was in the question, across organisations. And I think we have got a different mindset in the way in which we operate. But as Linton says, that then has to come back with some of those checks and balances that were in place beforehand. You know, the good governance to override that. Thanks.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, do we have any more? Do the officers see themselves working from home more in the future?
It's quite a topical one, this. I mean, we have been discussing it in quite detail through SLT, particularly with, I think, you know, with the new offices and wanting to make sure that for the well-being of a lot of our staff, that there was the opportunity for them to come back to offices where that is possible. I think, you know, it'd be wrong of us to think that working at home all the time for everybody is good. There are some people that have struggled working at home, particularly those that have had childcare arrangements that have wrapped around that. Others that have been trying to work in a small corner of a room that wasn't necessarily particularly set out for them to be able to work from home. And then there are others of us that actually it hasn't made that much difference. It actually maybe enabled us to to do more by working from home, to spend a lot less time travelling, a lot less maybe cars on the road, which has got to be good for the environment. But I think the important thing for me is that enabling those that do need to work in an office environment, that they can come in, and making sure that as we've now opened up the new offices at Times Square, that they are properly risk assessed and COVID safe for our staff to be able to come in there. On a personal basis, I haven't had to come into Warrington for a single meeting. I've been able to do all of that business using video conferencing, and I think it has been quite transformational in the way that it's helped the council to work. But that there are certainly things that you can't do via video conferencing and really do only work face to face. And I think we need to, as we go forward as an organisation, those are the things we're going to have to really try and get to grips with, particularly as we maybe bring in new members of staff. Yeah, how do you induct a new member of staff who's never met any of the team they're working with other than virtually? Now, some of that has to happen face to face, particularly as you bring people in who are wanting to learn a new job. Yeah, traditionally, people would learn on the job working alongside somebody else. Very difficult to do via video conferencing and remotely. But I guess these are some of the things we're still grappling with as we go forward.
Oh yes, it's a very small percentage before all this were actually working at home at all, and I can see that shooting up to possibly over 50%.
I think we were helped that our plans for moving into Times Square had always assumed that we would move towards much more flexible working with that building environment, and that we would always have some people not working in the building. So we were geared up for doing that, but we perhaps weren't quite geared up for the speed that we've now changed to, and the number of people that have been working at home at any one time. Gareth, did you want to come in? I know you've led a lot of this.
Yeah, been working on the offices for a while and working on home working. I think the biggest shift we've seen, Chair, is that we had a lot of people who would want to work 1 day a week from home and spend most of their time at a desk in an office. And when we went back to ask staff over the summer what their preference was, that had switched round. And I think what you actually see is most people want 1 or 2 days in an office, and the 3 or 4 days at home. There's people at either end who would prefer 5 days in the office, 5 days at home, or all of their working week in the office, all of the week at home, etc. So it has been transformational. I don't think we're different to most other organisations. We've had to take into account the public health advice in terms of, initially the general instruction to stay at home, the updated piece, which is only to come in where essential currently. And I think we've got quite a nice balance. Our staff have told us they felt really well supported, and certainly I think that we're going to be in a place where most people will do much of their work from home, with some of the exceptions that Linton spoke. I think the other point goes back to Councillor Marcus's question, which is just from my own experience here. So working in the first kind of April time, I got very involved with the testing of staff, the COVID testing, and we had to liaise with staff from a number of different agencies right across Northwest. So we were working with the Army, we were working with the Department of Health and Social Care and colleagues in other councils, CCG. Now, previously, to get those people to collaborate quickly, it was a meeting somewhere where everyone had to fix point, and it was just the time you would never get everybody all there. Instead, we quickly got into this rhythm of having meetings, every Tuesday, every Thursday, everyone would be there, short, focused meetings where we got stuff done. And I think that that was all about the agile working, whether you be in your home or your desk. But this way of working, I think, is it is extremely helpful in terms of getting some things done, albeit there are some things you can only do face to face.
Okay, thank you. Do any other members have any questions? Right, okay, do we move on to the work programme now? Most of us have got a copy of last year's work programme, which finished May 2020, and then of course this is the first meeting of this council year's programme. We usually have about 5 meetings a year. I think most of our last year's programme was completed. Linton, we did the Cheshire Pension Fund and the consultation and engagement, I think, was that correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
The local plan is still on hold, I think. Corporate plan and performance, I think, was done. The ethnic framework has gone over to the audit committee. Is that correct?
The ethical framework, yes.
Yes, the ethical plan. What did I mispronounce that? Sorry.
Misspoke, Chair.
Misspoke, yes. National funding formula was in the last meeting in February. School performance. We haven't looked at Livewire and Culture Warrington. So possibly that can go on our future work programme, because we didn't have the meeting in April. We looked at community centres, and then we hadn't looked at parks and open spaces. Again, that should have been on the April programme. So there was just those 3 items that we didn't complete. Now we don't have any meetings dates yet, do we? Looking forward. We've got the annual council, isn't it? 2nd of November. And it's usually around about the annual council that all the committee meetings for the year ahead are selected. Is that happens at the annual council, doesn't it, where they publish all the committee meetings?
Yes, it does, Chair.
At the full council the other day, There was motion 4, which said, I won't read you the whole motion, but one part of it says, this council asks the chair of Scrutiny Committee to investigate the extent and causes of hunger in Warrington and make recommendations about what can be done to tackle it by adding the issue to a Scrutiny Committee agenda within the next 6 months. So I stood up in council and agreed we could do that. So the outstanding items we have for our future meetings, the Livewire and Culture Warrington, which usually go together, Parks and Open Spaces, the local plan when that comes around, and then hunger. So I think we've got 4 topics there. Do we need to mention some dates?
Chair, can I just make a comment on a couple of those?
Yes, certainly. Yes, certainly.
Particularly on Livewire and Culture Warrington, it's my understanding there's a report due to be going to Cabinet in November.
Yes.
I think Livewire are looking at updating their business plan. So if we were going to invite them along, I think it would be helpful if they came after that point to then maybe explain their business plan. And I guess in light of tonight's meeting, understand their response to COVID as well.
Yeah, obviously COVID's had a massive effect on their planning. I was thinking the first one we could do would be hunger as a matter of urgency. So I don't know how many weeks we need to look at that. This is September. I was looking at maybe a meeting in November, one in January, and possibly one in March, and if needed, one in April.
I think we can certainly do one of those items at each of those meetings.
Yes.
I'd probably need to refer myself to the
most. My question is that this is the schedule. Everybody needs to be present, like committee, like.
Sorry, does everybody need to be present? Was that?
Yes, like me as well.
That is up to yourself, sir.
Okay. Thank you.
We did mostly about the schools at the last meeting.
Can I just pick up, Chairman? I think the fact that you've made a promise to full council to deal with hunger, it should certainly go to the top of the list for dealing with. In order that you keep your promise to council.
Well, yes, it's my promise, not the committee.
Yeah.
But I think that's a matter of urgency.
Yeah. And the other thing, which you're probably aware I've been going on about for years now, we don't have a strategic plan for parks and open spaces. Yeah, and looking at the way this has been discussed, particularly that Bob Barr's brought up in committee about the heights of buildings and so on, and also the lack of green space, and the discussing it. I noticed in the minutes of the last, I forget what the committee meeting's called now, the one that Tom Jennings chairs. They were discussing making green walls, and could we adapt some of the buildings to do green walls, but we couldn't adapt some of the buildings because we don't know if they'll take a green wall thing. But it just highlights to me that without a parks and open space strategy, we're going to be pulling buildings up in town centres with very little green space, not just green space up walls, but green open space where you can go and walk on it, maybe kick a ball about. I just think it's important, especially with the local plan coming up, and south of the river, they're shouting for about green space being gobbled up there, and we see brownfield sites in the town centre, just more and more buildings going on them without any recourse to what green space we need. We certainly need that strategy for looking at the green belt and for looking at the brown belt. So I would like to promote that as number 2 after Hong Kong.
Chairman, can I just add very much? Sorry.
Certainly, Councillor Marks there.
Yes, I agree with Colin. I think those are the two. I mean, the hunger thing you buy first, and parks and open spaces second. I mean, it's 5 years since we had an open space audit. It was 2015, so it's now 2020. So I'd have thought that was certainly due, and also for the reasons that Colin said. So I would certainly think those two. To my mind, the local plan, I mean, I don't quite know what we're supposed to be doing on the local plan. It's a whole issue in its own right. I'm not quite sure what Scrutiny can do right now. So I think it's those two, and let's just see how things transpire. I'm keen to do the live wild culture Warrington, but let's wait for the time being.
Chair.
Yes.
Yeah, I to support those two motions. I have been very concerned throughout the latter stages of the COVID crisis that we haven't had our older community able to partake of their bowling facilities in the park, not for matches and the big events that they wanted, but just to be able to go and spend half an hour throwing a bowl on the bowling green. And that seems to be very sad. I've had a number of representations from residents as the council greens have remained very, very tightly closed down. So that one, and also on the hunger issue, we had a lot of food share tables cropping up across all wards throughout the pandemic, and people helping out as best they could. And on the Central 6 Community Forum, we've been working to try to have a Warrington standard created where, because we were concerned about food being on the ground and things like that wasn't really very pleasant, and certainly some of the supermarkets that contribute that food wouldn't be happy with that situation either. So we felt there was a need to work with having some sort of standard for the food share as opposed to the food bank offering throughout the town. It's still very important to people to be able to access food share, because generally it goes to people who are not able to access a food bank immediately and who may find themselves in need. It also, of course, is to save food waste, which is a major consideration. But I do think we could include some of that investigation and work within and put some of those ideas forward, maybe. Thank you.
Yes, definitely. And it says in that motion to investigate the extent and causes of hunger in Warrington, to make recommendations about what can be done to tackle it. I think those are two phrases I picked up in that motion as well. But of course it includes all the food provision across the town that have sprung up. I helped set one up in my ward, Padgate Emergency Food Provision, and everybody calls it Padgate Food Bank. And then there's Helping Hands, and there's the Happy Hub, and all sorts of other, Rosie's Pantry, and a whole load of them across the borough. But yes, I would put food as number one. I definitely agree, and happy to have parks and open spaces at number 2, and culture and live wire. Live wire and cultural Warrington at 3, and the local plan we're just waiting on to. That's been on our agenda for a couple of years now, and I believe we're supposed to be scrutinising it when it's finalised. So that's rather flexible. We don't know if that's going to come up, so that has to go last for the time being. And then I'm very open to any other topics that members wish to put forward for us to have a look at. So I was thinking of a meeting in November, one in January and one in March. We can look at dates round about then. Possibly one in April, but possibly getting too near the elections. So I think if we make that known to Adam, we'd like, so that would be hunger sometime, is it sometime in what, middle of November, should we say, 7 or 8 weeks away from now?
Chair, just sorry, Jenny
yes,
from Democratic Services. Yeah, just to let you know, we are in the process of setting dates for all of the committees, not just the Scrutiny Committee, all of the other committees that the council looks at. So I will take your request back to the team to see if we can set up the dates that you've suggested, and I'll come back to you.
I was thinking middle of November, middle of January, possibly beginning of March.
Okay.
And then if we need a fourth one, middle of April, I suppose. They seem evenly spaced, about 7 or 8 weeks apart. Has anybody got any comments on that?
Yeah, just the last one, Chair. As long as it doesn't bang up against the local elections in May.
Exactly.
We have to go into further, don't we? Just be conscious of that.
Yes.
Mind you, we might not be having another local election if this virus gallops up.
Oh, I've heard they could be postponed again, yes.
Yeah.
Okay, with hunger as number 1, Livewire and Culture Warrington as for the 3rd meeting, and parks and open spaces for the 2nd meeting. I think we're all agreed on that. Yeah. Is that okay, Linton?
Fine with me, Chair. I can take that back to officers as well to make sure we've got something progressing on each of those.
Yes, there's a road forward. With the hunger, I don't know whether it's possible, whether whichever officer's dealing with it, whether I could go with them and visit some of the food banks and pantries throughout the town and see exactly what they're doing, what their needs are, about investigating what are the causes of hunger. I think it's redundancies, benefits, 0-hours contracts. You could probably have a whole long list of national
Chair, one of the Chair, I had one question of this. It is in Chair, I have one question. It is increasing or decreasing? Sir. It is increasing hunger. This is the like people more increasing or is decreasing compared to the in March, April, May, and now and in future. Do you think is it increasing or decreasing? You know, because a lot of people now is furloughed and sometimes going to be after that, you know, losing job as well. So do you think is going to increase, you know, number of this hunger? This.
If I were predicting, I'd say it's going to increase at the end of the furlough system and people being made redundant, losing their jobs. Couple members of my family have lost their jobs in the last few months, so it's going to be fairly grim, and I think it's going to get worse. I don't know if anybody else has any comments on that. Linton?
Chair.
Sorry, Chair, I'd put myself on mute.
On mute, yeah.
No, I guess for me, and I'll talk to colleagues first of all, the leadership team. I mean, it's almost how far do we want that one to go? It could look at all of the areas around the way the benefit system works and how that plays in. There's of course all the issues that have been raised around school meals and the costs of providing those meals for children when they're not at school, which is picking up a lot of pace as well.
Yes, definitely. Do you think it's going to get worse, Linton?
I
think I lost you. You're freezing up there.
It depends on employment issues, doesn't it? And how
it does.
People...
You're breaking up a bit there. You're getting every other word.
Chair, Councillor Flaherty.
Yes.
In our experience, we've been running a food share that we started up again. We've been running it for a couple of years, but we started it up again from our back gate over the last about 3 months. And in our experience, it is certainly there are more and more people coming who are in need rather than just using things so that they don't go to waste. And the key factor for us is making sure that those people that are in need, that we have a way of signposting them to the proper services, rather than analysing why they're hungry. But for the people that are volunteering to provide that service, that we are able to point them to the right place, to get the right help, to get them out of the situation that they've got into. And I think as things progress with the pandemic and COVID and all those things, it is going to go worse when the stoppage of furlough kicks in. Companies are going to go to the wall. People are going to find more difficulties. There's the situation of holiday hunger for children. Over the last 2 summers, we've provided food for 200 children over the summer holidays. We weren't able to do that this year because we couldn't use the park facilities. And I know they were provided for by another means, but it is really about finding a way out of it rather than necessarily at the first stage finding out why we're in it. We all know why we're in it in an overall sort of way, but we do need to think about making sure we've got the signposting facilities to put people to the excellent services that are available and make sure people get the right help. Thank you.
Yes, certainly, Jean, and the council can look and see if there are any gaps, what possibly the council can do to fill any gaps, or
yes, indeed, yeah,
or any needs of these food banks. They sometimes need something so fairly simple. I know the Warrington Food Bank itself, which has been running for years and years and years, I know the council have been heavily involved in helping them with their premises. So whatever the council can do to help people in need is what we should also be looking at.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else got anything on any of the topics? We talked about parks and open spaces and then live wire and culture. Okay. I think we come to the end of the agenda. I think it just leaves it for me to... Has anybody got anything else before I close the meeting? Okay, well, the meeting is closed. Good night, everybody. And thank you for your attendance.
Good night.
Good night. Thank you, everyone. Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you.
See you next time.